Gaming publications are going downhill, and that's not speculation at this point. Major sites are shrinking their staff count despite games revenue being as high as ever. Over 1,000 games journalists have left the industry in the past 2 years, shrinking the total number of them by 25%. Public perception of games journalism is at an all-time low, with YouTubers taking the spot that publications used to fill. But after reading into it, I found that it isn't just sentiment and YouTubers pushing against these websites. There's something else that's been carving out the insides of these publications, and that's what I'm going to explain to you today. Some context about the research I've done here. I initially got tipped off to this by an article from Aftermath, which I'll draw from often, but there was more I found behind not only the company doing all this, but even the specific people, all to be included later. With that being said, let's start from the beginning. Aftermath got into this story through a contact, Amber Warnock Estrada, who got a job at GamesHub. If you don't recognize that gaming publication, it might be because GamesHub primarily covered Australian content. It quickly grew alongside the gaming industry popping up in Australia, and it even has its own Australian games category for its news. However, Amber very quickly noticed that the job she got did not function like you'd expect out of a growing and well-known publication, at least in Australia. Amber never got a contract despite now being an employee, and every single day she would need to get a new password to log into the company's WordPress site. Her job was entirely independent, with no one even checking in on her articles that she would write, edit, and then publish onto the site all on her own. Throughout her entire trial period, she was introduced to no other coworkers, and the whole site had the undertones of gambling and cryptocurrency. You might wonder how a site with this sort of process could ever even grow in the first place. Well, the answer is that it didn't grow with this process or workflow. In 2025, the owner of GamesHub sold the site to an unknown party. After a month of silence, the website came back with some peculiar changes. At the very top of their editorial policy, you can see them talking about trust being everything when it comes to where you play, bet, or invest your time online. And if that isn't clear enough about their intentions, they state that their content is written by experts with years of experience in online casinos, sports betting, and poker. Their entire editorial policy is like this: line after line about gambling, betting, and casinos. Not a single peep about, video games. The site is called GamesHub. They were introduced to the world as a publication about video games, but at the top of their website, right next to gaming news, reviews, features, opinion, and business, gambling. And this category has more subpages than gaming news and reviews combined. This is not the story of a single website just losing their way after being sold either, because it's not a one-off story. Aftermath was able to learn that this site's new owner is Clickout Media, and once you know it's Clickout Media, you can find that it's connected to many other gaming publications. The Escapist, Esports Insider, Esports News UK, Esports.net, Video Gamer, PlaySense, Power Unlimited, Adventure Gamers, and more. These are all well-known gaming publications, and in each of these sites, the story is the exact same with one thing connecting them: the fact that Clickout Media became the owner. What it did is actually even more insidious than you might think on the first pass. Clickout Media is not just buying websites to get a few gamers who happen to visit the site into gambling. What it's doing is outright hijacking the search engine priority from the existing site, despite this being explicitly banned in Google's search policies. This strategy, also known as parasite SEO, takes advantage of the fact that sites like GamesHub have built up a high domain rating. This rating is what determines what sites come up first when searching for words that multiple websites include. The way this can be abused is by then adding many new search terms to an existing website, for example, gambling. This will then cause that website to use its high domain rating with those new search terms, even if they're wholly unrelated to the original website. How Clickout Media gets away with this for months at a time is specifically by owning the sites it's hijacking. By buying the websites entirely, it enters a gray area that allows it to operate as it does, according to online marketer Lars Lofgren. Lars also reveals the results of Clickout Media's buyout of sites like GamesHub. The site was getting more traffic than ever thanks to a combination of its existing domain rating and the new gambling keywords. This is Clickout Media's end goal. They do not want to just hook a couple gamers, they want to use gaming platforms to hook a ton of gamblers. Of course, Google eventually catches on to this, leading to a manual adjustment of the domain rating and a resulting drop-off in organic traffic. But this takes a couple months each time, letting Clickout Media abuse the system in the meanwhile, funnily clicks into their gambling sites. It doesn't end there. As I mentioned earlier, I dug into this topic more and found that Clickout Media is not the mastermind behind all this. This time, thanks to Timothy from Recludo for the information. If you look at the shareholders who own Clickout Media, you'll find only two entities, ARG Media and SBM Holding Group. Remember these names because we're going to look at the shareholders of a completely unrelated company, Finixio. At the bottom of this list, we'll see those exact same entities, ARG Media and SBM Holding Group. But who are these other majority shareholders, Adam Grunberg and Samuel Miranda? The answer will become clear if you just look into who actually owns ARG Media and SBM Holding Group. It's Adam Grunberg and Samuel Miranda. These two entities are shell companies for Adam and Samuel to own both Finixio and Clickout Media. Why hide behind a shell company though? It's because Finixio is even deeper into crypto and gambling than Clickout Media is, and having them separately helps hide why Clickout Media keeps linking to these sites. Not that you would even know either one is behind all this though, because they won't tell you. Neither one of these companies will say they do this because they'll instead say that they're just for marketing and SEO or digital marketing. This is despite us already knowing what Clickout Media does and being able to connect Finixio directly to crypto and gambling. If you want both in one fell swoop, look at crypto casino site Lucky Block, because Finixio accidentally posted Lucky Block code onto their own GitHub. What about this other crypto casino company, Megablock Gaming? If you look into who featured them, Crypto News, Techopedia, and Coincierge, all presented as unrelated companies, but we actually have a video of Finixio's dashboard of companies. Among them, we can see Techopedia, Crypto News, and Coincierge, all under Finixio's wing, and all featuring this one site. Pretty big coincidence if you ask me. The web of connections being established here, I want to emphasize that no part of it is even attempting to benefit you as a person, regardless of what aspect of this you care about specifically. First of all, it doesn't serve to help gaming or games journalism. From Aftermath's source, Amber, she had to write about 6 stories in 8 hours as part of her job. You just can't write 6 compelling stories in 8 hours about anything. It doesn't matter what topic. Here's a real example from an article written by Amber about Killing Floor 3's mixed reviews. This is the full article. I can fit it into one screenshot and most of it is just describing the concept of getting mixed reviews. With such hard-hitting analyses such as, it's worth noting that receiving a mixed review rating is not the same as receiving an entirely negative reception. I have nothing against Amber here, this is just what you're forced to write if you have to pump out 6 stories per 8-hour shift. And if you care about good games journalism for the sake of the gaming community, these sites are not producing that. On another front, you might think that this at least creates jobs in the shrinking games journalism industry. That's not really true either, because you have to remember that none of these sites inherently care about who writes the content. They only want to have writing to keep up the thin veneer of being a gaming site. Do you remember the buzz around the AI-generated review that Metacritic took down? That review was from Video Gamer, and that company is owned by Clickout Media. The same Clickout Media that's trying to lay off staff to replace them with AI, because again, they do not care about who writes the content and they do not care about the content itself. The jobs created by these sites once they're bought out are temporary and will go away because they are not attempting to run a game publication site. They are using these sites for parasite SEO, and once they get manually corrected, the sites and the writers lose their value. Finally, if you're not a gamer and you're not a writer and you do not care about anything here, but you love gambling and crypto and this all sounds great to you, let me say this. Do you trust the services of a site that has to use parasite SEO to try and get your attention? Would you trust any service that had to rely on a deceptive Trojan horse tactic to get on top of your search page? I truly believe, regardless of where you stand on any of these topics, gaming, writing, gambling, crypto, these sites are trying to take advantage of you in one way or another. I don't know if there's even more to this, but I do know that this research alone was serious enough to get Clickout Media to take Timothy of Recludo to court. That's probably why their site is down now. I'm a small YouTuber, so if this video suddenly disappears, you know why.